Welcome everyone to May Is For Metta 2020. I'm your host and facilitator, Beth Shekinah Terrence, and I'm happy to be exploring with you this year. For folks who are new, our annual practice has happened since 2010 and has grown a little bit each year. This is the 10th anniversary of May Is For Metta with a brief hiatus last year. And it feels as we're moving through 2020 with many of the challenges with the coronavirus and many people suffering in a lot of different ways, in particularly being in isolation through lockdown or quarantine, that it's important to have practices that help us to center ourselves, to cultivate loving kindness and compassion for ourselves, for others, and for the whole world around us, as well as really have an opportunity to have practices that can support us in our sense of connection, which can be challenged in a lot of ways at this time. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the structure of the program, and then talk about the foundational practice, which we've been beginning to explore in our first 3 days, and today's day 4. So we're continuing to offer loving kindness to ourselves. But going forward, we'll be talking about the foundational practices, the way we begin our practice each day, and then building from there as we begin to move out through different categories. So I wanted to just give a little more structure and insight into that and how to work with that as we move through the practice. I just want to share that since the program began in 2010, it's been offered through posts on my blog, The Heart of Awakening, Searching for a New Paradigm. Actually, that started in 2012. The first 2 years it was offered solely through a Facebook group community, and then I started my blog in 2012. It's hard to keep track, certainly these days. It's hard to keep track of the time. So, but since then it's been offered so primarily through the written blog post, which includes a teaching for each day about an aspect of the practice, and then a guided practice and some journaling questions. And so then I also will offer at different times some additional audios and videos to support the practice. But the foundation is through the written posts, just so you know, which you can always find on the blog, which is at my website, bethterrence.com/the Heart of Awakening. And I also, for folks who signed up via Eventbrite, you'll receive the post by email every day. For any reason you don't want to get daily emails anymore, you can just let me know. And then I'll also be posting in the community Facebook group each day. So that's how to access the practice. I'll also be archiving the posts in the Facebook group, and I'm going to start to archive them on the May Is For Metta page on the website as well. So hopefully it's easy access for everybody. I wanted to read the quote from today's post, actually, as we're getting started, which is from Pema Chodron. She says, "Compassion is not a magical device that can instantly dispel all suffering. The path of compassion is altruistic, but not idealistic. Walking this path, we are not asked to lay down our life, find a solution for all of the struggles in this world, or immediately rescue all beings. We are asked to explore how we may transform our own hearts and minds in the moment. Can we understand the transparency of division and separation? Can we liberate our hearts from ill will, fear, and cruelty? Can we find the steadfastness, patience, generosity, and commitment not to abandon anyone or anything in this world? Can we learn how to listen deeply and discover the heart that trembles in the face of suffering. The path of compassion is cultivated one step at a time and one moment at a time. Each of those steps lessens the mountain of sorrow in the world. I'll read just those last two lines one more time. The path of compassion is cultivated one step at a time and one moment at a time. Each of those steps lessens the mountain of sorrow in the world. So I love that quote. Obviously, I love quotes. Each post begins with a quote, and I hope it relates to the day's practice or some aspect of loving kindness that maybe speaks to you. And so I think as we're beginning this practice, I feel like that idea of it being like one moment at a time and one step at a time is a big part of it. And I mentioned in yesterday's post, as we moved into offering loving kindness to ourselves, that we're going to go slow. So I know sometimes people feel impatient or are worried that you're not getting it or haven't, done day 1, 2, 3, 4. That's okay. Whether you've done it or not, we're entering this container in a gradual way. And each moment that we can practice, whether it's sitting on a meditation cushion or on a chair, or just in the moment when we remember to connect with our hearts and maybe generate the feeling of loving kindness, that's an opportunity to really be stepping into greater compassion and for ourselves again, for others, those around us, maybe those who we'd like to be around us right now, but we're disconnected from, at least physically, because of our current situation, and then for our whole world. So I mentioned, I think it was on day 1, to just be gentle with yourself. I know I tend to have the perfectionism gene, and so I have to remind myself that often. And so just as we're approaching this practice, I think it is encouraged to have that spirit of gentleness and compassion for ourselves. So there are a few points I just wanted to touch on. Let's see. Okay. So a question came up. Someone had emailed me a question about whether they felt maybe this practice doesn't fit with them because of their own religious tradition. And I certainly we have to always honor our own religious or spiritual traditions and what feels best for us. But I just wanted to touch on that because it does come up sometimes. Metta does originate in the Buddhist tradition, and is a practice of loving kindness and compassion. And many, probably almost all religious and spiritual traditions have a practice that relates to that love and compassion. And so, although the roots of metta, are in the Buddhist tradition, loving kindness meditation in and of itself has really developed as a secular practice. So it doesn't necessarily have to be attached to the religion in any way. And May Is For Metta really, we talk about certain aspects of the teachings, the original teachings that, came from Buddhism, but the practice itself can be done as a secular practice. The Dalai Lama, I wrote myself a note here, I think, he always says that he encourages people to continue to practice their own religion, and that Buddhism can be, an adjunct or the practices, the meditation and the different teachings. And he talks about Buddhism as having 3 parts: the science, the philosophy, and the religion. And so we can certainly practice, from the place of the science and the philosophy, for those who feel there may be a conflict for themselves. I tend to, when this program arose, I've been a long-term practitioner of metta, going on probably at least 25 years. So it's been a core practice for me. So I call it metta, but you can also refer to it as loving kindness if that feels more comfortable for you. And there's actually a lot of research on loving kindness meditation, which you may see as the acronym LKM. And we'll be exploring more of that as we go through the next few weeks. I'll bring in some research about that. I'm kind of a geek when it comes to science and spirituality and where the two meet. So I hope that might be helpful for some folks who had that thought or question. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the foundational practice. I mentioned that we're moving towards that. So as we first began with metta, the essence of the practice is really about cultivating or generating, we might say, the feelings and qualities of loving kindness and compassion. And so I feel like it's really important to remember that, because sometimes we can get kind of caught up in the phrases and just, going through the steps. And so just holding that in our conscious awareness that the essence of the practice is cultivating and feeling that essence or quality of loving kindness and compassion. And so, I've shared in the post 2 ways to do that. The first way was suggested to kind of can do it in a few different ways. Think of a person in your life, one person, perhaps a family member or someone who you had a relationship with, who you feel that sense of unconditional love. Just as soon as you think of that person or imagine being with that person, you just feel that your heart just lights up with that feeling of unconditional love. So for me, often like my grandma Clara is a person who I would make that connection with, who just really embodied that, and I felt that connection maybe more with her than almost anyone in my life. So and then it can be a specific moment, even when you were with that person, that you can call upon. If sometimes that's helpful, you have a specific memory that can help deepen that for some people. Also, and I hadn't thought about this earlier on in my practice, but then as I started sharing the practice with others through classes and even in some of my work in addiction recovery, I met more people who felt like they didn't have that one person. They didn't have that sense of connection in that way. And so I think, it's important to know that we can cultivate that in different ways. And so for some people, I've worked with, they have an animal, a pet in their life, a dog or a cat, that maybe they felt that unconditional love from. And then for some people, maybe there's a place that, like their garden or just a place they've been, maybe even on vacation, where they just felt that sense of connection very deeply. And so usually most people can find something that they connect to, whether it's a person or an animal or, a place. And so that's what we're looking for as we're beginning to generate that feeling. So that's one way, and I encourage you to explore that way, and then the second way that I'll talk about a little bit as well. I think part of the reason this program is called 31 Days of Meditation and Exploration is that especially when we're working with practices that are related to the heart, it's important to connect with yourself, to tune into your heart and to feel what really resonates with you, what helps you to move into that space of the heart and connection. And so you may find one way or the other way feels more beneficial for you. And that might be overall, or it might be, right now, where you're at right now, what feels the strongest way for you to make that connection. So on to the second way is the circle of loving beings. I love saying circle of loving beings. And I believe it's one of the most powerful aspects of this practice. And it can be used as a tool for ourselves, whether we continue to practice metta through all the different aspects, but especially today, when many of us again are living in a place of isolation, having ways to create connection with those we love that we can't be with, or just feel connected to the people in our lives. I think the circle of loving beings, I think I mentioned in one of the posts that I have really been, as I've been practicing over this last month with the intention of starting the program in May, I just really found that creating that circle of loving beings supported me in my sense of connection. And I hope that you'll explore that for yourself too. So the circle of loving beings, you imagine yourself sitting in the center and you're surrounded by a circle, and your circle's made up of all loving beings. And this may be the person that you already connected with in the first part of the practice, or way to practice generating the feeling of loving kindness. But it can be people in your life, loved ones, family, friends, again, who really stir that feeling of unconditional love and connection. And it can also be universal beings. So again, maybe relate to your religious or spiritual beliefs. You might want to bring in a being, maybe the Buddha or Jesus, or anybody who you envision embodies that. So Mother Teresa, someone that I really feel like embodies that energy and quality of unconditional love and compassion. So I often bring her into my circle as that more universal being. And then again, animals, many people bring in their animals, their dogs, cats, birds. I have a bird on my shoulder, my little red. And again, and sometimes that might include a place in nature. Maybe your circle, when you envision it, is in a place in nature where you feel really connected and supported. So I guess for today's practice, I'm going to invite you to, as we move into it, and again, we're talking about the foundational elements, to explore both ways and see how it feels. A few things about the circle of loving beings that I wanted to say. It's often suggested that it's easier to work with people who are living than who've passed, especially maybe earlier on in the practice. But this varies for everybody. And I would say because it can be a wonderful way to connect with people that we've loved and lost, and our ancestors, sometimes, as I mentioned, my grandma. But if you find that a lot of feelings of grief or sadness are coming up, and maybe it's a more recent loss, it may be a distraction to your really cultivating and taking in that feeling of unconditional love. Because in a way, we're sitting in that center and we're surrounding ourselves, and we're almost like a sponge as we're breathing. We're taking it in and letting it fill us. So if there's other, difficult feelings, there'll be opportunities and ways to work with those feelings and with the people. Maybe even it's someone we bring in, a family member who we do feel that sense of love, but we've had a conflict with them recently. And so, we're trying to take in that feeling, but we're thinking about the conflict, and maybe we're feeling, angry or frustrated. And so there's someone right now we don't really want them to be in our circle. We will work with them, and work, and metta can actually be a way to work on that connection and relationship. So you may bring someone in and have a sense that, yes, they're part of my circle of loving beings right now. Or you may bring someone in and you say, I'm having some mixed feelings here. I'm gonna just put them out gently and lovingly. So, and that's okay. And again, that's part of the exploration. You may also find that your circle, you build your circle and it's set, and these are the beings in my circle. And you may find maybe different people come to mind or come to your heart at different times. So again, use this time as an exploration. You may want to switch between, one being or one moment and the circle as a way to do the foundational practice, especially, in this first week or so, as you begin to cultivate that. So, but, usually after a little bit of time, you'll get a sense of your circle. And as the more we practice, the more we can just drop into the moment and into that energy of unconditional love and compassion. So, so those are the in terms of the foundational practice, the first part is generating the energy and quality of loving kindness and compassion. And so you, again, choose to explore either of those ways. You can even do both, if you feel to, as you're starting your practice each day. And we really want to be, filling ourselves with those energies and qualities inside. I often say, in every atom and cell of our being. And then, as we breathe out, letting it surround and envelop us. And so the circle, I find, does really help. Sort of help us to feel surrounded and bathed in those qualities. And so then the next part of the practice, which is the first category, is offering loving kindness to ourselves. And that once we've generated that foundation, we move on to the phrases of metta. And there are different phrases you can use. I shared a larger list in day 3's post, and I have, actually I'll just pull up the ones that I will probably use most often in our practice that I tend to work with. But you can, hoping you'll be able to see it. Oh. So, okay, so the metta phrases will be something like this: may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be free of suffering, may I have ease of well-being. And you can use these phrases, again, look over the list from day 3, and you can also create your own phrases if that feels more beneficial to you. It's good to kind of be comfortable with the phrases you're working with. So, so once you move from generating this feeling of loving kindness and compassion, you'll begin to offer the phrases to yourself. And this can be done silently, or it can be done out loud as well. I often say a few rounds of the phrases out loud, and then continue silently for myself. So, so that will be what we'll be calling the foundational practice going forward in the post. And so I just wanted to be clear about that. I think I mentioned this maybe in our first post, but it feels really important. I'm going to stop sharing the screen there. Okay. Is that at the heart of the loving kindness practice, and particularly in metta and in the Buddhist tradition, is that in order to be able to offer loving kindness and compassion to others, that we have to have this foundation within ourselves. And so a big part of the practice, in addition to is generating that quality within ourselves and offering it to ourselves. And I think about a lot of spiritual traditions talk about the need to nourish and fortify ourselves. And sometimes we say, return to the well, so that we can become full. And it's, from that place that we're then able to support and connect with others. So, so this is this is at the heart of the practice. And so for many people, sometimes that's not comfortable. Sometimes we were taught, it's really better to focus on others, to offer love to others before, or time or attention before we give it to ourselves. And so it can go against our grain, especially as we take our time and really stay present with ourselves in this way. So that's something to notice and to reflect on. And part of any meditation practice is that it helps us to kind of see where our resistance lies, to see, parts of ourselves or feelings or beliefs we may not be aware of or might not want to see. And that's part of why I have included some journaling questions and the suggestion to journal a little bit each day, whether right after your practice or, at the end of your day. So you can reflect a little bit on what arises for you. So, and just know that that's natural for those, for feelings and thoughts and that resistance to come up to staying present with ourselves, to offering loving kindness to ourselves. And that resistance or discomfort is all the more reason to take some time to practice loving kindness and compassion for ourselves. Okay, I feel like I've said a lot, and so I want to just guide us in the foundational practice. And I did just want to read just a little bit from the Metta Sutta, which again, the feeling of metta is talked about being like a mother's love for her child. So I'm going to invite you actually to find a comfortable position. We didn't talk a lot about posture so far, but it is good if you're sitting to have your spine straight but not tense, your shoulders and stomach relaxed, and your hands on your knees or your lap. If you're on the floor, cross-legged is good. If you're on a chair, it's good to have your feet on the floor. Sometimes you need to move a little towards the front to the leading edge to just have your spine straight, but not tense. But, comfort is important too. And so, find what's comfortable for you. We won't focus on a very rigid or structured posture during this program, although that can be beneficial for some practices. But even lying down can be okay if you're in discomfort or that feels comfortable for now. Okay. So once you find that comfortable position, I'm going to invite you to, if you'd like, close your eyes, or you can also just have a soft gaze on the floor in front of you is another way to practice. And then beginning with a few deeper breaths, breathing in for a count of 5 and out for a count of 5. Just letting your body and your mind begin to slow down, to unwind. If you notice any tension in your body, any discomfort, you can just allow the next few breaths to gently wash over those areas. And if there's any busyness in your mind, any thoughts or worries of the day, you can notice it. And then just like a cloud passing by in the sky, you can just send it out with the next few breaths, just letting any thoughts or worries drift away. invite you to now bring your breath and awareness into your heart center, right in the center of your chest. And I'm just going to read the Buddha's words from the Metta Sutta. Just as with her own life, a mother shields from hurt her own son, her own child, let all embracing thoughts for all beings be yours. Cultivate an all-embracing mind of love for all throughout the universe, in all its height, depth, and breadth. Love that is untroubled and beyond hatred or enmity. As you stand, walk, sit, or lie, stay long as you are awake. Pursue this awareness with your might. It is deemed the divine state. So we'll take a few moments now to do our foundational practice. So I'm going to invite you to choose one of the ways to cultivate that energy of loving kindness and compassion. You might be thinking of one being or one moment when you just really felt held in the energy of loving kindness and compassion. We'll just take a moment to begin in that way, to practice that. So thinking of one person in your life, or animal, or even a place where you just, when you think of that being or that moment, you just feel totally connected to the energy of unconditional love and compassion. Imagine if it's a person or an animal or even a place that you're right there. You're with that person, that being in that moment, feeling that heart connection from your heart to their heart. And as you breathe in, really breathing in that energy of unconditional love. And as you breathe out, letting it surround and envelop you. And just taking in that energy with each breath, letting it fill you, every atom and cell of your being, bathed in unconditional love. And as you breathe out, feeling yourself totally surrounded by that love that comes from your connection with this being. And if you feel to, you can continue simply working with this one person, this one being, this one moment. But for our practice today and our exploration, I can invite you, for those who would like, to create your circle of loving beings. So imagining yourself sitting in the center of a circle. Your one being may be the first being or anchor for that circle. And then just first thinking about maybe what we'll call beloveds, family members, or close friends, whom you feel that sense of connection, that when you think of them, you just really feel the unconditional love and compassion that comes from your connection with them. And so one by one, when someone comes to mind, bring them into your circle. You can make that heart connection with them. And just feeling into how that feels to have them as part of your circle of loving beings. Again, there should be that really deep and clear sense of unconditional love, compassion. Your heart kind of melts when you make that connection and they they come into your circle. And if for some reason there's a mixed feeling or it's stirring something that just feels anything other than that, then you can know, just thank them and then move them out of your circle for this time. We'll work with them later. And so then moving on and bringing in another being, another beloved. If you feel like there's more than one who you'd like to bring in at this time. Again, making that heart connection, tuning into whether it feels right for them to be a part of your circle in this moment. Just noticing how that feels to begin to build your circle. Feeling the energy of love and compassion coming from the different beings who are part of your circle so far. And if you're feeling more beloveds, more friends and family you'd like to bring in, you may want to pause the video here, or you can continue to do so another time. But now I'm going to invite you to tune into perhaps some universal beings. So maybe there's someone from your spiritual or religious tradition that you feel that when you connect with their energy, you just really feel that energy of loving kindness and compassion, that they embody it, that they represent that. For some people, it's even making a connection with the Creator, with God, in this moment as a part of their way of connecting and their support. So taking a few moments to invite in those more universal beings to your circle who feel to come in this moment. And with each one, just making that heart connection, opening to receiving the energy and quality of unconditional love that comes from them. Noticing how that feels to fill your circle with your beloveds and with those universal beings who you feel connected to. And for some of us, let's not forget the animals. For many people, our connection comes from our pets or dogs or cats or different animals. So if there's an animal that really feel that unconditional love when you're with them in their presence, or one that was a part of your life even at another time, you might invite them into your circle. I always bring in my cat Percy and my dog growing up Baba's around, sit at my feet in my circle. And so for now, allowing your circle to be as it is and really letting the beings surround you, feeling yourself in that center, in your own sacred center. And we'll take a few more breaths, breathing in the energy of unconditional love and compassion that comes from all of these beings. Breathing it in on each in-breath, letting it fill you. And as you breathe out, letting it surround and envelop you as it fills your circle. And breathing it in, letting it fill every atom and cell of your being. Bathing yourself in the energy of loving kindness and compassion. from head to toe. And as you breathe out, just feeling yourself wrapped in this blanket of loving kindness and compassion. And on the next breath, allowing yourself to really feel your whole body, mind, emotion, and spirit filled with energy of loving kindness and compassion that comes from each of these beings who support you, who you're connected to from deep within your heart. Really taking that in. Again, as you become full inwardly and enveloped outwardly, you may feel no separation, but you just are this energy of loving kindness in this moment. Feeling that energy, that vibration. And it's this essence, these qualities, these feelings that are at the heart of our practice of metta, of loving kindness meditation. So this is what we want to begin with each time for each practice. And it's where we come back to again and again when we become distracted, have difficult feelings. Just always remembering that we can reconnect in this way with our being, with our moment of unconditional love, or with our circle of loving beings. And so we'll finish our practice for today extending metta to ourselves. So I'll say the phrases aloud a few times and offer you then a few moments to offer them silently to yourself. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free of suffering. May I have ease of well-being. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free of suffering. May I have ease of well-being. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free of suffering. May I have ease of well-being. So we'll just practice silently for a few moments in this way. You can use all phrases, one or two of the phrases, or whatever phrases feel best for you. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free of suffering. May I have ease of well-being. If you'd like to continue your practice, you can pause the audio. And so I'll invite you, when you're feeling ready, to come back to just take some deeper breaths once again. Sometimes it's good to move your body a little bit, your hands or your feet or your shoulders. You can open your eyes if they're closed. And I hope you enjoyed the practice and that this is helpful in terms of beginning the journey into May Is For Metta and loving kindness meditation as a practice for yourself. I maybe said this earlier, but I want to just add here, really, the intention of May Is For Metta is twofold. It's to help to support cultivating a daily meditation practice. And so we do that with the vehicle of metta and loving kindness meditation. And it's also to help support the cultivation of loving kindness and compassion in ourselves and others in the world. And so I think it's beautiful that the foundation of metta is generating and cultivating those qualities and then offering it to ourselves. And so, that will be the foundational practice. And if it's all you do this whole month, I think that would be a beautiful thing. But we will definitely have an opportunity to then explore expanding out the practice to the different categories. And we'll have a few more days of practice working with the foundation and offering metta to ourselves. But then we'll be moving out. The next category is benefactor or mentor. So sometimes that is, maybe also someone who supported us in our life very strongly, a grandparent or a teacher. Then we'll move to the category of what we call beloveds, so good friends and family members. The next category is neutral beings. So someone we may not know that well, we don't really have a feeling positively or negatively. And then the category of difficult beings, which was traditionally called enemies. So someone we struggle with in some way. And there's many varying degrees of that to work with. And then the last category is all beings. And that's very vast. So it can be, we often say all beings without exception. However, we can work with smaller groups of beings, and like all women, all animals, but even it's an opportunity to work with our community, our family can be a group of beings, the people we work with. So there's a lot of different aspects that we'll explore as we move forward. And so I hope you've enjoyed this introduction and the practice. I will be sharing, in addition to the daily posts, some additional resources, and I will definitely make some type of audio or video to go with each of the different categories as we move forward in the practice. So, but I also encourage you to use the posts and the written practice. And part of the reason I think that can be beneficial is that ultimately we really can guide ourselves in our own practice, and that intention there is to help and support you in doing that for yourselves. So I do always end each day saying Tashi Dele, which is a Tibetan saying that I've learned from my teachers, and it's translated in different ways, but the way I've learned is I honor the greatness within you. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you on the blog, on Facebook. Please feel free to comment, to share reflections, to ask questions. Have a beautiful afternoon. Bye-bye.